podcast for potential development by and with Uli Vogel. A warm welcome, dear listeners, to our episode today. I'm really curious to see what we'll learn today, because I have someone here about whom it's not so easy to find out much. I'm very pleased to welcome you, dear Rolf Ammon, to our podcast episode today.
Yes, a wonderful good day to you, dear Uli. Thank you very much for having me here today.
Great, and we'll get started right away. We have topics that, as you mentioned earlier, could easily fill an entire evening, but of course we won't do that. We want to make the most of this short time slot. So, just a quick overview of the structure we'll be following. We'll do a very quick bio, just so the listeners know where you're coming from. And that's really interesting to hear about this approach here. Then we'll dive into your values and how they formed and developed over time. I've already had a few conversations with you, and that's why I especially want to focus on this topic, because I think you're really strong and unique in this area. Then let's take a look at your unique approach to consulting. We want to see what sets you and your work with clients apart. And well, I think it also makes sense that, if we have enough time, we take a look at the current developments in our industry, and maybe you can share your perspective as well. You're an experienced consultant, and I think people really value your opinion. So, how did we meet? That was in October 2015 or early 2016. And the story is a bit of a wild one. Behind it, some listeners who know me well are aware that I've already fallen victim to copycats before. To be precise, twice, and the first copycat, well, you had dealings with him, Rolf, without knowing about me. And yeah, you were actually quite close to him, but then you were understandably disappointed and drifted away, or rather, you parted ways, and that's when you heard about me. And yes, we met up, and for many years now we've been working together very successfully. I really appreciate what you do. You've also connected me with people, like Francois, for example, regarding the BMW and others. So, yeah, I think it's been a really great partnership, or rather, it was and still is. And yes, it's also a give and take. That's something that, with you, it really comes across that everything here is always a two-way street. In life. And what's really interesting is that you're not findable online, you could put it that way, kind of different from others. And that's why I'll quickly toss the ball over to you, just a brief bio, so our listeners know a little bit about who's speaking here.
Yes, thank you very much. Of course, as you already mentioned, how we came together. That was in 2015. A few years before that, in 2007 or 2008, I really made a big change in my life. I came from a completely different industry, you could say. I studied business administration, and then I went into the insurance sector, so it was all pretty typical, really. I reached a point, at some point, through NLP, that is, neuro-linguistic programming, just out of personal curiosity. I got into that, and that's when this massive shift really happened. I actually turned my life upside down. I went through with it and said, no, what really matters to me is this sense of togetherness. First and foremost, it's about connecting with people, and then also showing them the path that I went through myself. So, it really started with my own experience, which is still something I recommend to anyone in this field. Yeah, I always say, for anyone working in personal development or supporting others, always do it for yourself first.
Yeah.
My teacher, who also spent a lot of time in the US, always said, you go first. That's exactly it. Do it yourself first, experience it yourself first, internalize it yourself first. And then, see if you've really got it down. Actually being allowed to accompany and support other people, that ended up being my path as well. Yeah, interestingly enough, to build a bridge here right away to the copyist topic. Yeah, so everything in life, everything that happens to you, is always good for something, you know. And in that sense, I can actually say thank you to the good copyist, because it was basically through him that I got into this topic in the first place. Yeah, and why was that? Well, for me, it was always about this factor, time. making use of it. Not just for myself, but also to save time for others. So, if I have ways to use things to optimize the work process for the benefit of the client or customer, then I'm totally a fan of that. But I always say, I'm not a fan of these endless rounds or, just putting in another 20 hours so I can make good money and the client pays a lot. And in the end, well, like in so many cases, that's just how it is, and that was always important to me, and I've been through a lot because of it. I don't even want to list them all here now. We're quite well known, from the 8 types to the 4 colors.
Yeah, all the things that are out there.
Everything, all the things that exist. It's really fascinating. For sure. You could spend the whole day on it and you'd always find really, really interesting things. But I always felt like there was a lack of an individual approach, and especially a lack of depth. And that's where I also, the copyist was definitely able to do that too. Let's just call him that for now. Let's call him that. Just like that, the copyist. It actually sounds kind of good. And in that sense, he really did. He did a good job for me because he really made me curious at first. I actually went through it myself back then. I was absolutely blown away by the result because I thought, this is sensational. How much depth in such a short time. And that was it. Yeah, that's when I really stuck with this tool. And I use it in my work today as much as possible.
But let me just jump in for a second, Rolf, because we probably have a lot of listeners who don't work with profiling values or psychometric methods. So, just to quickly explain here, the great tool behind this is the Hartman value profile, the value mathematics, which, by sorting 4 times, for us, 4 times 18 terms and statements, gives you a really deep picture. You get very close to the person. It really captures that. It didn't just fascinate you, it fascinated me years earlier as well, and I also first encountered a copyist. I don't know if you know that story, but let's just leave that aside for now. So, as you said, it's all good, and you work with the tool. And now the question is, unlike others, not findable on the internet, so where do these things come from? Or why do you
do it? Okay, so basically, in terms of what I do, I don't really work any differently than others. It's just that the way I get started is important to me. For me, it's always like this. Of course, over the years I've developed a certain idea of how I want to work, and especially with whom I want to work. And in my experience, websites are nice, written texts are nice, flyers might even be nicer and more tactile, really great. Yeah, and there's a lot of writing. And often it turns out that maybe there's something completely different behind it. My intention was simply that, and it still is today. I just prefer that direct contact. That means it's always really a direct, personal contact, even for the first contact.
So,
that means, to put it simply, I work exclusively based on
referrals.
That means I don't actually need any advertising in that sense. Well, today. It used to be different. Obviously, you have to get there first. Maybe I'll just quickly explain how I did that. And it's actually the case that nowadays, I simply work with people, other people who've already worked with me and have told others, hey, just give it a try with Rolf. We thought it was really great, really interesting, and very varied. Then a conversation takes place. After that, I, and both sides, immediately have a decision, and it's completely open. I always say, because it just has to be a good fit. And I also approach this very, very intuitively. I simply say, to put it bluntly, if my gut tells me to leave it, then I leave it. And that happens in a really, really short amount of time. Also, something that I just took from my training days with all sorts of tools, including as already mentioned, NLP and many, many other things, I've worked out for myself again, this intuitive approach, listening to your inner voice or your gut, or whatever you want to call it. That was a very, very important part for me, and I absolutely still follow it today. That's why you won't find anything from me.
Yeah, people often talk about website talk. And that's exactly what you're saying. No, I basically cut that out. I don't want that. I don't want it in there. And it's really about focusing on the original itself, analog, physical, present. And when you say, exclusively by recommendation, I know a lot of people from our community will be listening now, or even those coming from elsewhere. And they'll say, wow, that's a dream come true.
Of course, I did things differently too, just so people don't all think that it was just amazing from day one, and everything went perfectly right away, or whatever. I have to say, I was really, really lucky in that I happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right people. That definitely helped me a lot, for sure. That's really what gave me my start in the industry. That helped me a lot, especially as a complete newcomer, because it's really tough to break into this field, training, coaching, team development, and so on. So you just show up as a no-name, as a newcomer, you know, that sort of thing. So how do you actually get your clients now? Because, like I said, you can sink a ton of money into advertising, online or offline, or whatever else you might need. You wouldn't believe it, and neither would anyone else who's dealing with this. They know exactly what I'm talking about.
And
still, nobody gets in touch. Yeah, it's like, even if I have an online presence, nobody actually knows about it. In the end, they could find me, but they don't even know they should be looking for me. Yeah, and I spent a lot of time on that at the beginning, talked to a lot of people, and tried out a lot of things. And I also invested money. So, it wasn't a decision I made overnight, but really came from experience, where at some point I just said, okay, now let's just try something completely different. So it really came from that. Kind of from a feeling again, saying, like, or not, thinking for them. I needed a different path for myself, and then I just went ahead and did it consistently. Of course, with the people I was already dealing with, I did get a bit more persistent with them. So, it really isn't something that just runs by itself, at least it wasn't for me.
Yeah, I understand.
Like, thinking, now I can just sit back because I did a great first job, and so on. And now, all of a sudden, a bunch of referrals will just come in. No, so even getting the referral business going. You really have to explain it to people first. Because here too, I think it's fair to say, I don't know if that's been your experience as well, since you're much more internationally active than I am, but in other countries, the whole topic of giving referrals is, I think, easier than it is in Germany.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. Of course, I can't prove it empirically, but in my opinion, referrals in Germany are a bit, how should I put it, a bit bumpier than elsewhere. So, yeah, I can definitely see that. With what, let's say, set of values. Do you approach this when it comes to referrals on the one hand, but also in your consulting approach? Because I've always intuitively perceived you as, let's say, just different from others. And now I'm kind of on the trail and want to know what it is.
Yeah, I am. So, maybe to put it into an image that probably most people know. Again, all of us have flown before. I mean, on a plane, on a big plane. And everyone knows, before takeoff there's always the safety demonstration. In the past, the nice stewardesses used to do it. These days, it's just a video on the back of the seat in front of you. It's a shame, really. I have to be honest, I miss the old way. It was definitely nicer with the stewardess. And then at some point, there's always that part where they say, if there's a drop in cabin pressure, well then. Then the oxygen masks drop down. Then make sure you put the mask on yourself properly, and then you take care of your neighbor. This story, this image, has stuck with me for a very, very long time. And basically, that shows what I stand for and what I want to convey. That means first you look after yourself and take care of yourself. Your true self, yes, I'll get to that in a moment, and then, of course, see what you can do for others. Yeah, exactly. I actually once came up with the term myself. I really want to help more people become communal individualists.
That sounds nice. That's a beautiful transformation, so to speak, from
The two poles. And that's what drives me. So first of all, to really help someone come back to themselves. To build genuine self-confidence so you have some clarity. And that's simply because I went through that myself. In life. So, up until I was 40. I lived in a different world, I had a different job. To put it bluntly, I was still, in a way, controlled by society and my family. That's how it was. So, I did good work, I earned good money, and people thought I was crazy when I said, "What? At 40 you want to do something completely different and start from scratch?" Then I said, yes, because I believe this is finally what I am, who I really am. And the other thing, that wasn't me at all. That was basically just the preparation, and it gave me so much energy and such a boost to really say yes again. To do that, I want to share that, because for me, that's where the key really lies. So really, it's about this self-confidence. And through that, actually working out your own sense of self-worth in the first place. And then, basically, to take other steps as well. Maybe a little story about that, where it was really extreme. Bye-bye. I really wasn't there yet, so it came out in a really extreme way, and I really put myself out there. Fortunately, very early on at the start of my self-employment in this field, I landed a very nice and attractive trainer job at a large company in Frankfurt, which had its German branch there, and I gave sales training sessions there. And yeah, you get, especially at the beginning, with these big corporations, you get, this is what we want a roadmap. So I did that a few times, and then I thought, yeah, that's nice and all, but for me, it doesn't really hit the mark. Because there was always this sense of dissatisfaction, and everyone was always diligently sent to these training sessions. And gradually it became clear to me that there are a lot of people sitting there doing something that they don't actually want to do, and that they're not suited for it all. So I slowly started to turn things around, so that in the end, really, the people, the ones who stuck with it, were happy because they learned a lot, and the others said, "Wonderful, thank you very much, Mr. Amen, that was really great." I now know that, basically, in this position at my job, I'm completely in the wrong place, so I'm doing something else now. Of course, at first, there was
pushback from the client.
a lot of pushback, like, you can't just break up our team here.
Break up the team.
Break up the team. So I said, if you just take a moment to think about this reasonably, it actually works to your advantage. Because you're telling me about your turnover rate. And that's still the case in most industries, especially in sales. You're always looking for new people, they're pushed through, burned out, and so on. And nobody even looks into it beforehand at all. First of all, you could basically take a look and ask, does this person even have any potential for development? I mean, they don't have to be perfect, but do they at least have some potential for development? And that was at a time when I actually hadn't worked with profiles at all yet. And still, it was really interesting, because the boss of this academy director, of course, I had to go see him first, basically to get a grilling. But then he did recognize the potential. And then I ended up in a completely different concept, because I actually got to travel all over the country, from branch to branch. Because I said, working with people just here on site doesn't help at all. I'd really like to know how they work in their everyday environment.
Yeah.
But as I said, that would really go beyond the scope now.
But I found the story really instructive because we're just approaching it from two different angles here. You put it really nicely, this communal individualism, or rather. First, focus on yourself. I always say, the eternal. The first step is self-leadership before we do anything else at all. And then, on the other hand, we have these constraints. You also used the word earlier. External control. These structures, these systems that supposedly bring scaling and success and so on, that may well be true. But if we fill these systems with individuals who aren't the right fit, then we're not just burning people out, as you put it so well, but we're also harming the system itself. At the end of the day.
And of course, to be honest, most companies, especially the bigger and more corporate they are, they don't really have a genuine interest in that. But I have to say, for quite a while, that really frustrated me. These days, I say that for me, it's only about the person I'm working with. Or even if it's the specific group of people I happen to be working with right now, it's really all about fostering a deep sense of personal awareness and making it crystal clear what you do out there, the way you choose to make your decisions, and which path you ultimately take. That's completely up to you. And honestly, it really doesn't bother me in the slightest. The single most important thing that truly matters to me is that you gain a deep understanding of who you really are, and beginning your journey from the most ideal baseline knowledge about yourselves possible. You then consciously make the right decisions. And I'm not the one who says what's right or wrong. I'm really just the person who wants to say, I just want to put it a bit casually, I just want to open your minds a bit to help you find your own way to yourselves. And if you then say, yeah, that's nice, that's really great too, and maybe I would have liked something different too. But now I'm not brave enough, and the job interests me because it pays so well, I much prefer that, and I want this or that. Then I say, that's okay, yeah. But now you've consciously chosen that, and then you can't. Later on say something like, yeah, I actually never really know how it happens. So just in that direction, because I always say, I'm not trying to back anyone into a corner here. I just want to say, hey, I want you to have as much clarity and transparency about yourself as possible. Because only that, let's put it this way, is absolutely essential for me in order to then, better, I don't say it lightly. Right, but to make significantly better decisions in all matters, in all areas of life.
Those are the more conscious ones, then, as well. And Hartman put it in very striking terms, Robert S. Hartman, who founded formal axiology, said that, in his view, in society, actually, about 90% of people really just live in their roles and not at all as themselves. As a person. And in doing so, if we recognize ourselves as a unique concept, we could achieve an incredible amount. And that's where facilitators are needed. Back then, he spoke of so-called value opticians, which, really, should exist everywhere. So that people can see themselves more clearly, and humans are just made in such a way that they can find their own place. Have to find it themselves. And then he also says somewhere, we can live like vegetables, so we can just vegetate like veggies, or we can live a little lower than the angels, so we can really rise up high, and that's how you are, this.
Facilitator, love veggies.
No. Then I'm totally with you.
Yeah, but I think the key thing really is, you put it nicely just now, we need these supporters. And that's actually what I wish people had much earlier in life. And I always think it's fantastic when young people already have these kinds of supporters, mentors, or whatever we want to call them. Or that incredible luck. Maybe they have it, like your kids now, who basically get it with their mother's milk. That's a huge gift, because of course, if we're talking about time again, you end up saving an incredible amount of time. I mean, it took me 40 years just to even come up with the idea that I could actually think about everything for myself. And not just, simply dragging along and carrying out what I was taught growing up. That just wasn't enough for me anymore. I also don't think it's a problem at all if someone says, hey, yeah, that's all well and good, but what I have feels right for me. No urge or worry at all that I want to do something different. I'd say, wonderful, that's great. So, there's no pressure here or that everyone has to do it. For me, it's always like this. I just say, hey, I'll only offer it to you if you really want it, so a really high degree of voluntariness. Without that, what we do just doesn't work anyway. So, and
That means, yeah, actually, if I jump in here, for me, the main value, if you really get down to it, of you and your whole approach is actually maybe this value of self-confidence. I can really sum it up like that. Of course, it takes a lot of values to get there, to guide things, and so on, and then to help with development as well. But that's actually the central point, where you already said that right at the beginning, that's also the outcome. You're not a fan of long-winded discussions, are you? Instead, it's really about achieving something for someone. And that's a result.
yeah, because, let me put it this way, I can also just, let me put it this way, I always need clarity for myself first, and then I can have clarity for others. That means I need to know where I stand, and then I can do something for others. Yeah, so, as the saying goes, only those who love themselves can truly love someone else. So, we can actually apply that to everything. Yeah, it always has to start with us.
Yeah.
And for me, it just has to be convincing and suit the person. So, it only works if they actually take the step to really deal with themselves. Of course, that's often uncomfortable, but I always say, no one ever promised it would be easy. But for me, it's really this incredible opportunity for self-discovery that can truly be life-changing. It can really help you move forward. And I always say, especially when, well, as we both know, I don't need to tell you. We're constantly dealing with people who are always like, yeah, but. And they're unhappy with this, unhappy with that, and so on and so forth. And then the outside world is supposed to change all the time, just so we can be satisfied again. And all those classic situations, yeah, I really get that. Someone makes it clear and says, the solution always fundamentally lies within yourself.
Yeah, it would be pretty strange if the universe went out of its way just to please me. That's always the misconception that actually comes up. And earlier, a bit ironically, you also talked about luck. And it's true for many successful or even just content people that they say they've had a lot of luck here and there. Yeah. That's probably true to some extent, but I also think that when it comes to luck, it probably starts with yourself. A former colleague once told me early on, well, luck has two components, preparation and serendipity. And it's the same here. You aren't prepared by someone else, you prepare yourself. Leaders aren't developed by others, they develop themselves. You didn't just end up there by chance. You made the decision, and that's why I think it's real. It's also an argument for what's called the internal locus of control, meaning taking charge of your own path. And for that, I think you really need to know yourself very, very well first.
Yeah, and it's also really important to let go of preconceived expectations. So, I'm really open-ended about it. I approach it without any fixed expectations, both for myself and for others. Yeah, and that's why, well, I've had lots of training situations, coaching situations, team situations, where things turned out completely differently because you don't just stick to the plan, but instead, you say, okay, the situation is totally different right now. I can remember a classic time management training session. I walk in there. It's morning, and there are 30 people sitting there. The youngest is just shy of 60, and the mood is absolutely terrible. I thought, well, okay, and introduced myself. Hello, and here we are at time management, so let's get started. Right away, I got a bit of a cold shower, so to speak. Yeah, they've been working at the company for 20 or 30 years, and now they have to do this again. So, to have some young punk tell them about time management, no way, right? Well, it quickly became clear to me. We wouldn't mention the topic even once over those 2 days. Instead, it was about something else entirely. Just let it flow freely for once. Yeah, let everyone vent first, and then see how each person can better position themselves in the future, what they can do to get themselves out of this frustration as much as possible. And I think that's where I'm really good, recognizing the situation and immediately getting to the heart of the matter. But now I really have to make the connection to the profiling values. Let me elaborate on that point for just a moment. Because of course, this tool has really saved me an incredible amount of tedious work and valuable time. What I used to have to exhaustively inquire about and painstakingly figure out all by myself is now handled instantly. Is now answered by the client or customer themselves. And interestingly enough, and we have definitely talked about this before, it often carries much more weight and has a greater impact than if I were to just say it myself as an individual person. So, I always found that fascinating, but it never bothered me, like, I never felt offended that someone values the tool more than me. Instead, I always say, that's great, that's fantastic. It makes things even faster, it makes things even easier. And it's like, to put it plainly, he's putting his own finger on the wound. And all I can say is, look, here, we can do it this way. So I've had some really, really amazing experiences. And above all, this depth in this, yeah, we go from 0 to 100 into yourself and can get started right away. And that's what still fascinates me to this day, and you can say quite clearly, everyone who really had the courage and set out on the journey. It's also essential to just give it a try. And even if many things didn't work out, people still went for it, took away a great result, took something with them. And I always say, in principle, it's always been worth it for both sides, because it's always the crucial, important or even decisive, important steps towards oneself.
Very good. Nothing can top that, Rolf, because the half hour just flew by. Thank you for this lively conversation. We jumped from one thing to another, but I think we still managed to cover almost everything we wanted to. Thank you so much for being with us. And yes, I'm glad you took the time. And hopefully we'll see each other again very soon. And I'm looking forward to working together further. It was great having you here, dear home.
Thank you so much, Uli. I really enjoyed it too. And yes, I can only encourage everyone to stick with these topics. Something always comes out of it, and it works out in the end, especially when it's about yourself and then for others too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Ciao, ciao.
Oh, thanks.
Ciao, ciao.